Gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
What is going on, CaneSport, and good morning to you all. It is Thursday, May 9th. I'm Izubee Charles, joined by Stephen Wagner, and thank you for starting your morning off with us with Good Morning CaneSport. Wags, I want to waste no time and jump right into it. It's been a few days since Miami added their last transfer portal addition in Michigan State defensive tackle Simeon Barrow, a talented interior defensive lineman who's going to bring a lot of veteran presence to that D-line room and some production as well. Miami was super busy in that post-spring transfer portal window, bringing in a handful of guys, and I kind of want to talk about those guys and all of Miami's transfer portal additions this offseason. Want to start off, with the big one, running back Damian Martinez. Matt Chadeau always likes to talk about free agents or just additions to the roster. What's your take on Martinez? And obviously, 1,000-yard rusher, proven guy at Oregon State. What's your take on him? What do you think he brings to this Miami roster?
Yeah, I mean, Damian Martinez was probably the best running back to enter the transfer portal in this most recent cycle. I mean, heck, I think that there's an argument that he could be, or that he could have been the best overall player to enter the transfer portal in this last cycle period. It started looking like Miami was going to get him about a week before they got him. Once he scheduled that official visit, it really felt like Miami was starting to trend in the right direction. But really, more than anything, what I was kind of impressed with this cycle is you saw Miami, and I know Matt wrote about this the other day, but you saw Miami start to move away from going out and getting players just because they dearly, dearly needed players who could fill the roster. And they're starting to get a little bit more selective with the positions that they go after, understanding what they need. I think that they're moving toward. I think they're moving toward a much more sustainable model, in my opinion, of going after a handful of free agents here and there, rather than trying to construct an entire roster year over year in the transfer portal. I mean, that's something that Colorado is doing, and that's kind of the great experiment to see how well that really works. Florida State has done it, and credit to Florida State. They have hit on an incredible amount of transfers, and they obviously had a ton of success last year. But Miami's getting to the point where where the roster foundation really is lying in its high school recruiting, which is what Cristobal wanted all along, because it's much, much more sustainable. Because right now, in today's age of college football, you're not only dealing with talent acquisition, you also have to deal with roster retention. You have to deal with keeping these kids on your roster once they come to your program. And I'd say that so far, Miami has done a pretty good job at keeping the guys that they really want on the roster on the roster. They haven't really lost too many guys to the portal where you really go like, man, that stings, or how are we going to recover from that? And for the most part, this roster has upgraded year over year. I mean, I do think that they should be a little bit better at really every position this season except safety. But Miami's now to the point where they can go out and they can add a Jalen Alderman because they just need another linebacker. You can get a free agent in Damian Martinez, who I think is going to be a game changer, and Miami is obviously very, very high on. That might be the finishing piece to this rushing attack. This is going to be the best back that Cristobal has had since kind of his early days at Oregon with Justin Herbert. I mean, this roster now is in really excellent shape. And then after that, I mean, you just go out and you get a couple of depth fillers. Simeon Barrow, I don't think that, he himself is a game changer. I don't think he solves every problem that Miami has along the defensive line. But he is a guy who can come in and play right away. He can rotate snaps. He can play defensive tackle or nose. He's definitely more comfortable at defensive tackle, but he's taking snaps at nose too. Then you had a guy like Deone Hill. who really and truly is just a depth filler. And there's nothing wrong with going out and getting a depth filler if you really do need a depth filler. If you go into the portal saying, man, we really need a backup corner, it's totally okay to go out there and get a guy who might not be a free agent, who might not immediately make your starters that much better, but a guy who you can rely on consistently, and a guy who Lance Guidry is already very, very familiar with, and a guy who they clearly still believe can develop into an even better player. They've shown a few guys. They've shown a few guys the door this spring, which is kind of expected whenever you consider the amount of players that they're bringing in to be able to stay under the 85 scholarship limit. But the guys that they've ushered out, I mean, I can't really see anyone where I really stop and think to myself, oh man, that's a little bit of a head scratcher. I'm really not sure what was going on there. I'm not sure I really understand that move, or what have you. But overall, I mean, Miami's roster is better right now, and Damian Martinez is absolutely the crown jewel.
Yeah, I think this is the best roster. Well, obviously, this is the best roster that Mario Cristobal has had in his 3-year tenure at Miami. I just remember, when I first started covering the Canes, when I first started working for CaneSport, you saw that roster and you said, okay, well, that was my first time looking at a college football roster, up close and personal, reporting on a team. And I'm just like, all right, is this what it looks like? Absolutely not. Year 3 watching spring ball around, that is what a program is supposed to look like. Big guys in the trenches, athletic guys on the outside, those hog monsters in the middle, doing the work, athletic linebackers, and just, that whole line, big guys all around a program. Mario Cristobal is bringing in a certain body type and a certain player to that program. And you love to see it. Obviously, Rome wasn't built in a day, and we've known this is a lasting project. Miami hasn't, really been good for the last 20 years, and we've all known this. Miami's had their struggles, coaching changes, not hitting on the right guys and things like that. But Mario Cristobal, like you mentioned, is kind of doing a great job of blending that transfer portal and that high school recruiting, kind of working it together. I feel like Damian Martinez is a perfect example of that. You have a very young running back room with Mark Fletcher, who's proven, but he's a little bit banged up heading to the fall. A guy like Chris Johnson, who has a lot of talent, and then guys like Chris Wheatley-Humphreys and Jordan Law coming in from St. Thomas Aquinas. All very, very talented guys, but I don't think now is a perfect time to throw them into the fire, to make them be that premier, that staple back. You bring in a guy like Damian Martinez, one of the best on the market, and I feel like he's going to help, make that transition, or help, those running backs make that transition from, a guy that has a lot of potential to say, hey, I was behind a guy that's proven, a guy that's, competed at the highest level and succeeded. And now, next year after Martinez is gone, you can really count on a guy like Mark Fletcher, a guy like Chris Johnson, and then you have those stables of backs coming in, the Chris Wheatley-Humphreys, the Jordan Lyles, and I feel like Jalen Alderman is another perfect example of a guy that's that can be the bridge for Miami. From with Kiko and Wesley, those are the top linebackers in the group. But after that, you got Popo Aguirre and some unproven guys, underneath him. I feel like Alderman's a perfect plug-in guy, coming for a year or two and help get those guys confidence, help build those guys, and be that bridge. And just looking at the roster, like I said, I feel like this is the most talented roster Miami's had under Cristobal, and in a few years as well. So I'm excited to see how this pans out in the fall, and I'm really glad or happy with the guys that Miami brought in this transfer portal haul. Like you mentioned, I feel like they're going after select guys, those free agent, as Matt likes to say, instead of just, hey, we need this guy, we need this guy, we need this guy. And the guys that exited the programs, all great players, but there's not one guy where I was like, man, this really hurts the program, but man, this one really stings. Obviously, losing, Jaden Wayne kind of hurts, but you've got a lot of talented guys. You got a lot of talented defensive linemen, and you got a lot of talent just in that D-line room in a whole. So excited to see what this transfer portal class can do. Steven, given a grade, what would you grade this transfer portal class?
Are we talking about for the spring, or are we talking about for the entire offseason?
Spring portal class.
Matt, I feel like I'd probably give it like a solid B+. Damian Martinez is a home run. Deone Hill is, a good player, not a great player. Simeon Barrow, I think, is a depth filler. Jalen Alderman, definitely not a superstar linebacker, but, his production numbers were comparable to Wesley Basaint. And then, of course, Tyler Barron still taking visits and what have you. But overall, this is a good transfer portal haul. This isn't out of this world ridiculous. Given what Miami did during the fall, whenever they went out and they were able to get a Cam Ward, and heck, they even got a pretty good backup quarterback. It looks like in Reese Poffenbarger. So I'd say this class is good. It's not incredible, but it's good. And I think overall, this now gives Miami a very, very, very good roster. And I do think it's fair for those expectations to be high. The talent level is finally at the point where you can fairly have very, very high expectations for Miami. I do not think it's ridiculous for fans to want a 10 or 11 win season, an appearance in the ACC championship, or even an ACC title for that matter, and be competing for a spot in the college football playoff, especially now that the playoffs expanded to 12 teams.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And then if you do want to add in that December, transfer portal window, you bring in guys like Cam Ward, Mish Powell, Elijah Austin, Marley Cook, and on threes, JD Pickell, he picked his winner for the transfer portal was Miami. If you take a look at, like I said, the December transfer portal window and the spring transfer portal window, Hurricanes brought in a ton of difference makers on both sides of the ball. So excited to see what this roster could do during the fall. Obviously, we have a lot of time between now and then, but it's granted that fans can have some hope. I know a lot of people don't want to drink the Kool-Aid too early and all that good stuff, but it's hard not to when you have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, leading your team, and you also have both the coordinators back, proven head coach Mario Cristobal, and playmakers on both sides of the ball. So very, very excited to see what this team can do. And we have a great story on the transfer portal hall on the site this morning, so make sure to check that out. Going to move on into a little bit of recruiting. Stephen, you recently spoke with 2025 athlete Herbert Scroggins, a guy that Miami hosted for the spring game. He has an official visit set with the Hurricanes, but a few other schools are pushing for him as well. After speaking with him, man, just what's the latest in that recruitment? What's he saying about Miami?
Yeah, Herbert, he's kind of a unique build whenever you look at him physically. He's 6'3", 215, but he's got a really good, thick, wide base. And he's a guy who has the speed and the size where you could either play him, at defensive end, you could play him at jack, you could play him at linebacker. You can kind of move him all over the place depending on what your cup of tea is. And there are different programs that are recruiting him at different positions, but Miami's looking at him as maybe possibly sort of like a Reuben Bain type of guy. Where he would probably play a lot on the edge, would definitely add some weight once he gets to Miami, and maybe even have some opportunities where he would move inside a little bit. But really, they're looking at moving him all along that defensive front. Auburn became a name that we heard quite a bit this spring. Auburn really got after it a good amount. North Carolina is also in the mix, and then Georgia Tech and West Virginia too. I do think that Miami is absolutely going to have a very good chance here. Lance Guidry and Jason Taylor both went to go see him at his high school the other week. It seems like things are in very good shape on that front. It does feel like Miami is in a very good spot, but a decision probably isn't coming for a little while. I would anticipate we don't hear anything about a decision until maybe July or August, so we do have a little while to wait. But I do like the position that things stand, or I do like the position Miami's in after he had a chance to get down to campus earlier this spring.
Yeah, like I mentioned, Scroggins is going to take an OV to Miami, and man, Steven, I feel like these OVs are coming up, real quick. I think in about 3 weeks' time, towards the end of this month, the first round of OVs are going to be taking place down in Coral Gables. I'm super excited. I know you're excited as well too, but a lot of talented guys are going to be down, in Miami in the month of June, and a lot of guys Miami may have, a good chance to move that needle with. So Scroggins is going to be one of those guys taking an OV to Miami in June. So we'll keep you updated on him leading up to that. But until then, just check out that update Steven got on him. Want to jump into the 2026 class. These are kind of the stories I like writing, or I love hearing about when one of these coaches, so in this case, Edwin Pata, went up to a school in North Carolina looking at some other prospects, and then boom, 6'5", 300 offensive lineman appears in his face, and he's like, where the heck have you been in this world? So this young man, he's actually a top 30 offensive lineman in the 2026 class. Kenye Ogboko, and He earned an offer from the Miami Hurricanes, a big guy in next year's cycle to keep an eye out. So make sure to check out that update. Steven, another 2026 guy you spoke with out of Pennsylvania, Alex Haskell. Just what's the latest on that? What did he say about his Miami offer?
Yeah, Haskell, a defensive lineman. Kind of a long, lanky guy. He's about 6'4", 245. Kind of a guy who could play inside or outside, kind of depending on, where his weight ends up at, how much that a school wants to put on him. But Jason Taylor got up to his school the other week, and it seems like made a really good impression on Haskell just by going up there. Haskell and Taylor didn't actually speak with each other. But Taylor went ahead and extended the offer through his offensive line coach, told the O-line coach that he really likes his length. He really likes his size. He really likes kind of the way that he's built, kind of a longer, leaner guy, a lot like how Taylor was. And I think they might actually be comparable in size, or they might end up being comparable in size at least, because I think Haskell's probably still going to keep growing because, the kid's only a sophomore in high school. He's going to continue to get bigger. But that's a kid who absolutely has some early interest in the Hurricanes. It's just a matter of figuring out when he can get down for a visit.
Yeah, Miami sinking their teeth in early with these 2026 guys. Another prospect in that class that picked up an offer from Miami, a top 30, 35 tight end in the 2026 class coming out of Georgia, Caden Protho. Had the chance to speak with him, picked up an offer from Miami. 6'6", I believe, over 200 pounds, really, really big tight end, over 800 receiving yards, 13 touchdowns last year. Couldn't imagine if it was 30 touchdowns. That would be crazy, but 13 touchdowns, a lot of big schools in the mix early. He likes Miami, said a few good things about them, and is hoping to get down on a visit as well. So make sure to check out that update on him. We also are going to have more coming through the site this morning as well, so keep an eye on that. For Stephen Wagner, I'm Izubee Charles. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Have a great rest of your day.